Hey guys, and welcome to the premiere episode of...
The Super Stache Bros.
So this has come about because we are stuck in quarantine together. We do enjoy a lot of the same things and everything like that, so we're trying to keep ourselves entertained, and maybe we can keep some of you guys entertained as well. Have anything to add on that?
In quarantine, you got a lot of time on your hands, so a lot of free time to think up some pretty wild videos. So, I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some cool stuff that we're wanting to do. It's going to be a very mix-match kind of thing because we're kind of mix-match kind of people.
Like a bag of trail mix.
Nutty. But, our first video, we both kind of thought of it at the same time, and we were like, hey, we should do our top 5 end of the world movies. And what we done was we actually done 6 because we done an honorable mention, but we chose our 5 favorite end of the world movies, didn't tell each other what they are. So we're actually going to surprise each other here as we speak about, as we talk about each one of them. So I'm going to kick things off. We're going to start with our honorable mention and work our way backwards to number 1. So my honorable mention would have to be T2 Judgment Day. And we both got like little things from Rotten Tomatoes synopsis, so we didn't write all these cool write-ups for everything. But it's a sequel to the sci-fi action thriller that made him a star, Arnold Schwarzenegger, that is. A-list Hollywood name, writer-director James Cameron upped the ante with the follow-up to employing more sweeping storyline and cutting-edge special effects. Linda Hamilton returns as Sarah Connor, now a single mother, to rebellious teen John Connor, Edward Furlong, during the late 90s, when a new and improved Terminator android called the T-1000, Robert Patrick, arrives from the future to eliminate John, and the older model, the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, must protect the boy. So the reason this one just gets an honorable mention is because most of the movies on my list are actually end of the world movies. Whatever, the apocalypse has already happened and everybody's struggling through life after the apocalypse. T2 is actually them trying to stop the apocalypse for the majority of the movie. So I just gave it an honorable mention because it does have some very cool end of the world scenes and deals with the end of humanity and everything, as most of the things on our list will do. I'm going to say also that I think T2 is still probably the best out of the series. What would you think?
Oh, yeah. Definitely one of the rare cases where a sequel's an improvement on the original. That seems to be James Cameron's shtick because, Aliens first, now T2. But then really after that, 3 through, 6, really just trying to copy what T2 did, and it just doesn't have the same spirit to it, I guess.
And the 6th one, it was a pretty good movie, but one of the things that I noticed, it continued off, of course, T2, because they were like, let's go back to the one that worked. But all those practical effects that made T2 stand out so much is really what made 6 stand out as being a very subpar version of T2 to me.
Someone had a lot of fun in CGI post-production.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things still looked cartoony and everything like that, where T2 just look pretty amazing up to this day. A lot of the effects, the practical effects, is just amazing in that movie. So it definitely got its honorable mention on my list. Anything else you want to add before we go to your honorable mention?
No, if you haven't seen it, watch it, because it's definitely worth the watch. And the first and the second one. I mean, you can watch the 4 others if you want, but definitely the first 2. So my honorable mention is a little bit more on the darker side. It's I think 2009. Don't quote me on that. End of the world movie. It's called The Divide. I'm trying to think of who you might know. Michael Biehn, who's also, fun fact, in Terminator, stars in it. And it's pretty much these 9 strangers all in New York. They get trapped in this underground bunker of this apartment complex during a nuclear war that breaks out. We don't really know much about the nuclear war. When the time the story starts, it's already everything's going down. The buildings are collapsing. So all these 9 strangers that live in this building manage to hunker down in the basement. Slowly, over the course of a few days, rescue's not coming. They're running out of food. And pretty soon they start to turn on each other. So really it's kind of like Lord of the Flies meets the apocalypse. So it takes that concept of all these people trapped all together in this confined space, and it just amps it up to 100. It's definitely, starting out, it kind of like all typical, post-apocalyptic movies. They work together, try to find out a way to save themselves, and it just spirals into a horrible, horrible nightmare. Tension between them. They start going crazy from the radiation poisoning. Alliances form. There's some pretty shocking scenes about who bites the dust first and stuff like that. But no, I really enjoy this one because it does offer a realistic view of what might happen if we did end up facing like a nuclear war. It's not going to be, everyone's not going to band together and be like, oh, let's help my fellow man out. It's pretty much going to be every man for himself, which is kind of what this, dissolves into.
And if you think that's not true, just go and try to hug somebody right now.
Pretty much. So, we're already getting there. It's not even technically the end of the world, but people will break your kneecaps if you breathe on them the wrong way. But it is a very depressing film. I will say that. It's not a fun, lighthearted movie you watch with the gang. It's definitely something you watch if you're into that whole not every movie has to have a happy ending type scenario, which I personally love because it does.
That's not a spoiler.
It's not a spoiler. The situation, happy, there's no real happy way to end a story about nuclear war. But yeah, if you have anything to add.
I would definitely put this in my top 10 end of the world movies. It is very bleak, but it warrants that. It's kind of like there's not a lot of scene changes or anything like that. It's definitely people driven, and it's a very, very good movie. If you've not seen it, definitely give it a watch.
I agree. So, very highly recommended.
Okay. I guess I'm going to go on to my number 5 out of my top 5 list. So, my number 5 is 28 Days Later. So, the story goes, after breaking into a primate research facility, a group of animal rights activists discover caged chimps chained up before blanks or screens showing horrifying violence. Ignoring the warnings of the terrified researcher who maintains that the chimps are infected, they begin to free the animals and are immediately subjected to a bloody attack from the enraged creatures. 28 days later, cycle courier Jim awakes in a London hospital. He wanders into a church where he finds that Britain has been overrun by victims of a bloodborne virus called rage that turns everyone into frenzied murderers. So I will say that this movie was our big introduction into fast zombies. And at the time, we've all grown up on George Romero and the slow zombies, and you're like, I could manage a zombie apocalypse. Everybody had their plan, go up on a roof, start pegging some zombies and everything like that. They were, they weren't really the scary part of a zombie movie. The scary part of a zombie movie was really the survivors that's going to kill you for your stuff. Mm-hmm. This movie changed all that. When you saw these zombies, victims of rage coming at you full speed and doing nothing but wanting to kill you, you're like, all bets are off. It actually becomes scary again to be at the end of the world with this kind of zombie apocalypse. And I also remember, it's kind of got this grainy kind of weird film quality to it that makes it kind of grungy, and it just had a unique feeling that hadn't been in very many zombie movies up to this time. So that's why it's number 5 on my list. Anything to add?
I almost put it on my list, but then I took it away because it is I think it's probably one of my favorite zombie films. Like you said, they're not really zombies per se, but it was really the world's first introduction to those violent, crazy fast, full-on, killers. And so it was dark, it was violent, bloody, it was non-stop all the way through. So yeah, highly recommend that one. I actually need to go back and watch that one. That one and the sequel were both really good. So if you like the zombie movies, definitely check those out. So my number 5, or I'm sorry, did you have something to add?
Oh, no. I was just going to say, time for your number 5.
My number 5 is The Road. This one's actually based off a novel. I think 2006 is when the novel came out.
He's probably wrong on all of these, but meh.
Not normally, but The Road is pretty much an apocalyptic drama. Again, it's more of a character-driven film. It's this son and this father. They don't have names. We just know them as dad and son. They're basically walking along all of North America on deserted roads, just trying to survive, just trying to figure something out. We don't really know much about the apocalypse in this one, like what happened. We just know society's over, and there's only a few small pockets of survivors left here and there. And this one, I would say, is more the bleakest apocalyptic film I've ever seen. Because it's just, this family trying to survive, just going from place to place looking for like old canned food, stuff like that, just to make it another day. And so they're trying to, I guess, make it to the coast where they have water on their back so they don't have to constantly worry about the threat of other people, which in this one is the biggest threat. It's not zombies or anything like that. It's, you've ran out of food. So it's people just basically, trying to survive eating each other. But yeah, this one was a bleak one, but it was also a more realistic family approach. Like, how would a family stay together in times like this? Anything to add?
Yeah, this one is very more on the realistic side of things and everything. Very bleak, very, you can feel that this might be how it actually happens when there is a post-apocalyptic type environment. People are really always the scary thing. Human beings are the scariest thing around. They are the real monsters and everything, and that's what this movie does a very good job of portraying. And just you talking about it actually has me excited for the Last of Us series that's going to be coming out because,
Unfortunately, did you see they've actually delayed The Last of Us Part 2?
I did.
Of the coronavirus.
Everything right now is delayed.
Yeah,
so I mean, right now everything's delayed, so that doesn't surprise me and everything. I haven't been looking at the news as much here lately, just because it is rather depressing.
It is like watching a movie.
It is, and I've seen enough bad movies to know how this goes down. So, I guess I'll jump to my number 4. My number 4 is called Right at Your Door. And it's after multiple dirty bombs are detonated, spreading deadly toxic ash across Los Angeles, Brad inadvertently quarantines his wife, Lexi, outside of their new home, safely sealing himself inside. With the city under siege and martial law in effect, Brad and Lexi struggle to survive with few supplies, limited time, and no information, all while separated by thin doors and thinner sheets of plastic. When help finally does arrive, it appears to be anything but. This is a really cool movie. It's probably flown under a lot of radars. I don't think it's I wouldn't consider a high budget movie at all. It's very character driven, and it's really the relationship of this man and woman. The man is inside, and he can't let his wife in because she'll actually bring in that toxic ash with her, and it's almost like they're having to choose. He's having to choose his life over hers, and they're kind of talking about those things while she's outside and he's inside, and it's a low-key movie, but a very good one, and so I'd give it a try.
Yeah, if I remember this one correctly, it definitely offers a good take on the end of the world, because really, once the bombs drop off, if I'm remembering it correctly, so it's kind of, again, like another one of those character studies, a marriage. Would you risk your life for the person you love? Or, if they're going to die maybe potentially anyway, would it really be purposeful to do so? So, yeah, I would definitely give it a try.
It asks some hard questions, and it's a little uncomfortable, especially now in these top environments where we do see husbands and wives where the wife or husband has to actually go outside and work and everything, and they're having to stay in separate places just so that they don't bring things home to the family.
Or, there's photos you're seeing on Facebook of people visiting, like their grandparents through glass doors and windows. It definitely is chilling to see. So I guess I'll move on to my number 4. And this one is probably one everyone's heard of. This is probably the most mainstream one that I've got on my list. Mad Max Fury Road. This one is definitely more on the lighter side of the apocalypse thing. Most of the ones on this list, or on my list at least, are very down, very, bleak in nature. But that's just the nature, end of the world movies. In the case of Mad Max, it's more of just like a full-on, non-stop action film from beginning to end, filled with all these quirky characters, unique characters, personality traits. And basically, if I remember, in this one, it's a world where gasoline and water are like more valuable than money. And so it's really, I think the thing I love most about Mad Max is the apocalypse itself is not really the main focus. We know what happened, we know the rules of the world and everything, but the real focus is these characters who have adopted this new way of life in, it's road, cars, collect all the resources you can. And so it's really just these characters, they've already adapted to the apocalypse. They're fine with it. They're, at this point, just doing what they need to do. And yeah, it's definitely a good film. I love this one.
Well, Mad Max is actually my number 3, so we can go right into it because that works out perfectly. It's like you said, it's a huge, bigger than life characters. Everybody in it's their own star, kind of. There's so much going on. It's like this massive car chase from beginning to end, and just everything about it's really cool. I mean, the only thing they got wrong was it's not gasoline, it's toilet paper that everybody would be after. But other than that, I think they've done a really awesome job of capturing, like, it's like a grander than life version of everything, and they really did have fun with it, and it was a really fun movie. I very much enjoyed it. We liked it so much that me and some of my friends, we did a gender bent version of Immortan Joe and his wives. We actually done Immortan Jane and her husbands. Maybe I'll put a picture of it right there in the corner or something like that. So that's how much we liked it. So that was my number 3. I liked it just a tad more than you did.
Well, so moving into my number 3 is probably one that a lot of people haven't heard about. And forgive me if I butcher the name. Melancholia is what it's called. It's by Lars Van Trier. But this one's definitely a unique take on the end of the world scenario, and the fact that it's not something like, a virus or an outbreak of a disease or anything like that causes society to collapse. It's a rogue planet that gets pushed into our solar system on a collision course with Earth. So basically the whole movie, life's normal, society's fine, everything's fine, except when they discover this rogue planet is going dead on through Earth, it's pretty much, what can you do except just wait around for it to collide? And so this one offers a really good take on the end of the world scenario. The world's still, moving about, everything's fine, but in the sky throughout the whole movie is this huge planet, and it's just slowly inching its way forward, and it's just characters kind of reacting to, we have a week left, so what do we do? How do we react? And it offers really good different point of views for it. Some people accept it and they're like, I'm not going to worry about it. If I die, I die, and then other people are like, I don't want to die. I want to live. So, but then again, there's nothing you can do about it. So it's a really good character study of how people react when they know that the end is near. Highly recommend it. Great film, great characters. Anything to add to it?
No, I've actually not seen this movie myself. It has Kirsten Dunst in it.
Kirsten Dunst is in it. Kiefer Sutherland's in it. So it does have some pretty big names in it. And they're wonderful in the roles. Perfect casting.
Yeah, I'm going to add it to my own list of movies that I need to watch. So,
Number 2.
On my number 2, this is actually a tie, but since they're technically the same movie, I'm going to let it slide. And my number 2 is Dawn of the Dead original and Dawn of the Dead remake. Even though they're the same movies, they're very different in ways. Of course, the original Dawn of the Dead is a classic. It's about bunch of people getting together. They hole up in they hold up in a mall and kind of wait out the end times as the virus changes people into flesh-eating zombies and everything like that. Of course, George Romero, he has the slow zombies and everything, and he has more of a deeper study into human nature, everything like that. George Romero's movies always had an undertone of a lesson that you could learn from it and everything. And of course, Dawn of the Dead was, it had a lot about society at the time and everything like that. The remake, of course, it come after 28 days later, so we had our fast zombies. And it really changed the movie into more of an action-style movie, but in a good way. I thought it was an excellent remake. They kept a lot of the elements, a lot of the cool characters and everything like that, and just upped the ante a lot on it. So I'm going to say, there's a lot of people that's like stay true to the original and everything, but I'm just going to say I really enjoyed the remake. I remember actually going and seeing it at the movie theater, and right at the moment where she is finally getting in her car and pulling away, and it pans up and starts showing like the carnage of the whole city and everything, all the power went out inside the movie theater. And the guy come in and he's like, we've had a citywide power failure. We'll hopefully be back in just a few minutes. And so we're all sitting there just like, because it's an extremely just tense moment and everything. And we're all like, okay, maybe it's the end of the world. Maybe it's zombies. But I'll never forget that about that movie, and it just kind of adds to why I love it so much.
Yeah, and I pretty much agree with the same thing. The original, you can't really honestly compare the two with the original and the remake. The original, it was more the slow, typical zombies that we all know and love, but it was more, again, life lessons, characters. Like his zombies were actually their own set of characters pretty much throughout most of his films. Whereas with the remake, they're the threat. They're just mindless killing machines. And it's just a good classic, try to survive the zombies and try to survive each other. So yeah, I would recommend both. My number 2 is another, we're going a little further back with Dr. Strangelove, or aka How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This one's a classic Stanley Kubrick film for everyone who knows him. I think it came out in the 60s sometime, so I think I'm horrible. Was that not around the time of like Cold War or whatever? But, it's more of a satire than anything. So again, it's kind of more lighthearted. It's about a rogue U.S. Top official. He kind of goes crazy and is threatening to drop nukes onto Russia, and Russia's like, we have a device that will destroy the entire world if you do this. And so they're trying to meet in the war room, is what they call it, and they're trying to figure out how to stop this guy from giving orders to all the planes in the sky to drop this bomb and causing, the end of the world. So this one, again, it kind of takes place right before the apocalypse, like leading up to it, but it's more of a satire in the way that it doesn't take itself too seriously. There's some really iconic imagery and lines in there. And it was just a really good look at how, honestly, it might be ran with the higher-ups if something like nuclear war was a threat.
I would agree with everything. That one, I definitely thought about putting it on my list and everything like that. It's very dark comedy. I mean, like you said, it has a lot of memorable lines, a lot of like really cool imagery and everything. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend seeing it.
All right.
Ready for number 1. Drum roll. So my number 1 is it's actually a television movie that aired on the BBC called Threads. And it is a speculative story of World War III. And it really focuses around this young couple that, even though there's like all these tensions and everything going on, they decide they're going to get married, they're going to do everything, and then all of a sudden, I think it's like called Sheffield. It's like a British working class town. It's like they have like a nuclear bomb go off, and all of a sudden they have to deal with like the fallout of this nuclear bomb. And it is absolutely one of the most depressing movies I have ever seen.
It is very depressing, especially for something made for TV.
It doesn't hold back on anything. It's shows how humankind like erodes back into this like pretty much like dark ages time where it's like pestilence and famine and strife, and it's just a terrible, terrible world. It's like, it's kind of like life goes on, but really, is it worth the cost for life to go on after something like this has happened? And it is absolutely. You really need to watch it, but it's definitely on my top 10 not feel good movies out there.
Yeah. It's definitely not a movie you watch to feel better about the world ending potentially. But it is, again, a really good, honest, brutal take on what would probably happen if, we had a nuclear war. So, I mean, it doesn't hold back, and, it doesn't have to hold back. So, my number one is, again, kind of a more mainstream film a lot of people may have seen, Children of Men. This one came out in 2006. I remember that. Pretty much in society, it's not collapsed per se, just all the way yet, but it's been, I think, 20 years since the last child has been born. And so the human race has pretty much came to a standstill, and they're faced with the fact that they're probably going to go extinct after, this generation. And so it kind of gives this feeling of like, how do you deal with the fact that you're fine, but your species as a whole will cease to exist in a couple years because you can't produce any more life. And that leads to society degrading until, of course, our main character comes across a woman who is potentially pregnant with the first human baby in, 20 years. And so he has to...
27 years,
27 years. And so he has to get her, to scientists so they can study her. Maybe they can find a cause for what's causing the infertility, or maybe they can find a cure for it. So, again, it's very thought-provoking, very realistic, very well acted. The story's intriguing, it's interesting, and it just asks, a lot of the hard-hitting questions, kind of like my other one, Melancholia. You're fine, like there's no immediate threat, like zombies or a virus you have to deal with. It's more you have to deal with the ever like growing sense of dread that, we're just inching further and further and further to death, and there's really nothing you can do to stop it. So I thought it was a really good take on the end of the world.
It is. It's definitely a different kind of take, and it's probably a take that could be a more realistic type of take with as much kind of stuff as we do to ourselves with medications and everything like that. It's not so far-fetched to all of a sudden, like 40 years into the future, microwaves make us sterile or something like that over time. It really kind of makes you think about things like that, like the hidden threats of things. I'm not even sure if they really talk about what caused the infertility. It just sort of happened, and
that's one of my favorite things about, it's kind of like The Road, Children of Men. It doesn't, even Mad Max, it's not what causes the apocalypse that's the important thing, it's how society deals with it. Because, if the world doesn't, a few years after that, it's not really going to matter how it happened. It happened, it's over. Now it's going to be kind of, how are you going to deal with that? Living in that world now that, it's changed and it's ended. So it kind of just offers a really good look at, it happened, this is our new way of life, so how are we supposed to live with it? So, definitely highly recommend that one.
I do as well. And I'm sure that after all this dust settles on the coronavirus and everything, we're going to have some new takes on end of the world movies coming up soon. Probably a lot more toilet paper snatching and hand sanitizer and antibacterial soap stealing than anything. So
I'm already working on my own take on that. It's going to be groundbreaking short film.
So I hope you enjoyed like our first episode. It's pretty much just a chance for us to get together and talk about things. We have ideas for a lot of different type things. It's not all going to be about movies and everything like that. I think our next video is going to be our top 5 favorite cryptids and why we like them. And we're also going to do some other things. We're big nerds. And we're just going to see as interests go, and then we get more bored, we're probably going to get weirder and weirder videos. So hopefully you'll stick around and see what we get into. And if you have any ideas on what your favorite end of the world movie is, I got time. I really need new ideas on movies to watch right now. I've went through Netflix so much I can almost tell it by heart. So
all the time in the world. So I never thought I'd live to see the day where I actually can say that I have too much time on my hands.
And then as soon as we have to go back to work, we'll be like, man, I should have used that time so much better. But that's just life.
That's just how it goes, pretty much.
But we'll have these videos to look back on fondly.